Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Legends podcast. It is, I don't know when this will be released, but it is November 20th, 2020, an auspicious day, perhaps. And we are in about month 9, I think, of the coronavirus COVID experience that we're all going through at the moment. So I hope everybody's okay out there. I don't know when you're listening to this, but maybe you can comment and let us know and what's happening now. Today, I'm introducing somebody who has been on my wish list for years to interview. We met at one of the clothes swaps that I used to run, and instantly I was drawn to her. She had an amazing twin boys with her in the pushchair and just has this kind of glowing energy. And when I went to speak to her, it turns out she went to Liverpool University, and I'm from near Liverpool, so we had this nice connection. But every time I speak to Liza, she just gives me a different perspective and really interesting things to say, and always makes me kind of go, whether it be about the down low or entrepreneurism versus corporate work. She always just gives me some really interesting insights. And then when we got to know each other better, it turns out she has a very, very interesting background and story, very different to my own, but also with overlaps. And I adore her. So I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome, Liza.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure. And honestly, it's such an honor.
Oh, you're so welcome. So I'm going to do your official bio now. So Liza was raised and born in rainy England.
Yeah.
She moved to China after winning a scholarship via her work at the European Union, and was featured in publications such as The Guardian, The Financial Times, and others. Brackets, I'm looking at a photograph of her with David Cameron, the former Prime Minister of Britain, right now. She also worked for Arsenal FC, delegating with VIPs. She studied consumer science in Liverpool and then marketing at a business school in Oxford. As a Miss Jamaica UK finalist, she promised to work towards world peace with actual action. This interest led her to Rotary. She is the past president of the Rotary Club in Shanghai and a TV presenter and panelist for Japan's long-running popular NHK Cool Japan television show. My father-in-law loves that.
Yeah, so does mine.
I'm so happy that I've got people who are on it, so I could be like, I know it. And they're always like, She is in Japan with her husband, who is a Tokyo lad, and they're twins. Identical twin boys, is that right?
Identical twin boys, only 1 minute different, but their personalities could not be more different.
Amazing.
They're like night and day.
She loves football, tea with milk, Star Trek, and is learning to love baseball. Maybe I can get some tips on that. Liza, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny because my husband name is Suguru, so he's actually named after a Tokyo Giants baseball player. So it's kind of like calling your child David Beckham,
or like Steven Gerrard, or Gerrard because of Steven. Yeah. I had to go for a Liverpool player.
Yeah, of course.
Or Jurgen. I'm sure there's a lot of Jurgens in Liverpool these days as well.
Right.
Brilliant. So thank you, Liza. I just kind of want to start talking about you, but actually that's not what we're here for. So I'm going to first just jump in with our first question, which is, tell me about your ancestry, your cultural inheritance, and where you're from and your family background.
So my mum is actually from Jamaica and my dad is actually American. It's a bit of a wild story, but my mum used to do pageants and so on. And she had a friend, and her friend said, oh, let's go down to the base. You know, all the cool looking GIs are there. And my mum was like, ugh, no, I cannot deal with those Americans. And her friend was like, come on, you know, let's go down there, it'll be fun. So they went down there and they got in because, you know, they're gorgeous ladies. And they saw this guy, and this guy was standing in the corner, very tall, you know, very good looking. And my mum was like, oh, he probably loves himself. And this guy was like, oh, that girl, she probably loves herself. But they kept asking about each other. And they kept saying, oh, I don't like that guy. Oh, I don't like that girl. But they still kept asking about each other. And then one day, someone said, is Andre, is Andre there? And he wasn't anywhere to be found. So my mum took that opportunity to talk about how awful men are, how awful this guy Andre probably is, how stuck up he probably is. And she put a tap on her shoulder and she looked up, and it was Andre, my father. And yeah, they got together. So I've got, and he was in the Air Force. So I've got family in America and also family in Jamaica as well. And of course, family in England.
Wow, that's fascinating. And which part of America was your dad from?
Florida, Miami, Florida. So my parents separated. And people would say, are you upset because your parents separated? And I said, no, my dad lives in Miami. It's great. Every holiday I'd go to Disneyland and, really play up on the part that, oh, daddy, you're over here and I'm over there. And he'd be like, okay, what do you want from Disneyland?
Do you know what? That's one of the things I absolutely love about you, Liza, is you just have this endless optimistic kind of, where other people would find, reasons to be upset about their situation. You always have this really positive outlook. Tell me where I'm wrong.
Thank you. No, I don't know. I think it's from my mum, because she grew up in a house and, I know it sounds cliche, but that's how I grew up, playing Bob Marley music and reggae and dancing. And in Jamaican culture, even if you're 50 or 60, you still go out to the nightclub. But it's not seen as a nightclub, it's seen as a meeting place where you dance.
Yeah.
And so there's always this energy, even in the darkest times, you'll still find humor. Yeah. And I think that's a very important characteristic that I got from Jamaican culture, I feel.
And how does that influence your life now?
It influenced my husband's life, because now he's worked at Jamaican time. So before, Japanese, because my husband's Japanese, so before he used to be very into, you have to be on time. But now he's worked out, actually, I've seen the Jamaicans and they go really slow and nothing really bad happens. So before he was very punctual, but now he's very, oh, don't worry, it's okay, be calm. And I think it's influenced my life to just be more open and more positive, I think.
Open and positive. Oh, we could all do with a bit of that. And as I'm hitting 50 next year, so
wow, you look fantastic.
Oh, look at the lighting though. I'm going
full on Cano system. You've got that 1920s, cinematic, dramatic look.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to hear that. But yeah, this is my Kano sister. Do you know the Kano sisters, those Japanese sisters who have had all the plastic surgery and dress up?
Oh, yeah. Do they wear the low-cut tops?
Yeah, they've got the massive bazookas. I love them.
They're awesome.
I love how much surgery they've had, how unapologetically hyper-feminized they are. Just love them. But they light themselves for the gods. And I'm like, I'll have a bit of that.
I need to get on that lighting.
It's just, I mean, it's good for, and to be honest with you, it's pure chance that this has happened today as well. But anyway,
I'm sitting in front of the window, and I was hoping I'd get that, like light, but it's actually overcast and cloudy.
It's better that way, because otherwise it could be too
bright.
Yeah, it can be too bright. Yeah, in fact, I am too bright, but that I'll go with it, since you've just given me the cinematic.
Like Blade Runner. They have the
yeah. I'm down with that as well. So that's what I want. I'm in for the kind of like carrying on with the dancing and the as we get older. But that's it. So is there quite a strong sense of kind of elders there? There's different kind of strong sense of elders still being able to participate and things like that.
Yeah, well, this is it. In Jamaican culture, because the saying black doesn't crack.
Yeah.
We're not stuck down to like conventions of you have to look and act a certain way. And obviously even though my mum my mum's not as conservative as some mums are, you know, like she's not heavily into the church. And that's nothing against the church, of course, but it just means, you know, you have some elders who will go to the church and they'll wear their best outfit and they'll look, you know, Jamaican ladies or West Indian ladies, when they go to the church, you know, they really make sure they look good.
Yeah.
Whereas my mum, she'll go out to a dance, darling, a dance. You know, and she'll still, I've got so many of her outfits and they're quite risque, but not in a, how can I explain it, not in a not elegant way. It'll be like a dress that goes quite low down at the back, you know, stuff that you look at and it's very nice, but you wouldn't believe it's actually from my mum.
Yeah,
you know, she has an amazing style. She's fabulous.
that
I adore my mum.
Oh, you adore your mum.
I adore my mum, especially now that I have kids.
Yeah,
I realise what I put her through.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So now I realise, I'm sorry, Mum.
Oh.
Yeah.
What's she like then, your mum? What's her name?
Merlin, like the magician.
Shout out to Merlin.
Yeah, shout out to my mum. Yeah, she's just so fabulous, because she's just like, you know, she never. Okay, I'll tell you a story. What happened once in Jamaica, they had this huge train accident. Oh, I'm jumping. So one day my mum wanted to go out, you know, everyone was going out. It was the fun place to be. And they used to have parties on trains in Jamaica. And so mum really wanted to go to this party, because she was just going to come to England, because this was in her teens. So she was just going to come to England after. So this was her chance to have a good time before she had to move to England. And because my mum's from around the Windrush generation, although she never came on the ship, the Windrush, that carried a lot of people from the West Indies and Jamaica. She said, I came on a plane, darling. I came on an aeroplane.
She's one of the clumsy people.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, get you, Mum. Going back to the party. So there was going to be a party on a train. Like, how epic is that? And she went to the tailor to get these fitted trousers, and she wanted it like, I think she'd seen like a model, maybe Twiggy. I'm not sure if the timeline matches up with Twiggy, but one of those models. And she wanted to look just like this person. And she went to the tailor, and the tailor kept saying, tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. So she eventually was like, look, today's the day of the dance. I really want to go. And the tailor said, I haven't done it. And she was so angry. She was like, I'm not going to the party. And everyone was like, Merlin, stop being so silly, just come. And she was so upset that she was just not in the mood. And the thing about the party was her dad would never let her go to a party on a train. So she was going to sneak out of the window and go on this train. And then fast forward, she woke up that morning to news of the epic train crash, a huge, terrible train crash, and it would have been the train that she was on. And I think most of the people on that train lost their lives. So she would have snuck out in the morning. Her father wouldn't have even known that she'd passed away. And I know it sounds like a random story, but she always said, never be upset about disappointment, because in effect it can save your life. And I've always grown up knowing that story, and it's always made me think, you know. And I know my mum hasn't had the easiest life, but she's always tried to carry optimism and love. My grandmother is also amazing, but she wasn't very affectionate. So my mum was overly affectionate to us, and I loved it. So even though we didn't have the easiest life in terms of perhaps financially or whatever, it was just great, because she really instilled the feeling of appreciation into us. So yeah. My mom.
Such a great story. I mean, it's like from that day onward, no day is taken for granted. Exactly.
And if I got upset, she would get really annoyed at me and be like, what are you upset for? Shut up.
And that's what I love about you, is that sense of always just always this lens, like the way that I talk to you, it's like I could quite easily take your hand and lead you down a victim route with me, like, oh, you know, something, I can't exactly say what it is, like a poor
I know.
thing. And you always have this way of turning it round, but without ever making me feel like I was doing that. So it could be anything. Like I can remember talking to you about something, and you were like, oh, it's interesting, I was reading this book, and then like I was like, oh my god, oh no, you shared an experience you had in China with me. We may come to that later, we may not. But yeah, you shared an experience of something similar that happened to you in China, and it just shone a light on something for me so brightly.
Oh, wow.
And I was really, 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 I think it was when you announced you were getting married to your husband, and suddenly the mood soured and you weren't expecting it. And that was against the backdrop of a secret that somebody had been keeping from me. And I said I was really upset that this secret had been being kept, because it's me. And you were like, yeah, but you know, Sarah, but you didn't say it like that. You just told that story. And I love that, this storytelling. And it's the same way you just shared that story with you about your mum there. It's like that, like I've got goosebumps now thinking about it, because it just
and it's a very famous train crash, because I looked it up. Because obviously I believe my mum, but you know, it's not until you see it that you're like, oh my god, that's crazy. It's wild. And so many people lost their lives, and it would have been, and her father would never have known, you know. So
wow, there but for the grace of God go I.
Right.
So that leads me to the next question. There's two questions to this. The first one is, what prompted your mum to come to the UK?
To rebuild the country, you know. There's a big tradition. Not everyone knows about the Windrush, but basically the Windrush was, people went over to Jamaica, and they actually asked and said, listen, we want you to come over, you're part of the motherland, because my mother's passport didn't say, it said Jamaica in tiny letters, but it said Great Britain, you know, it said British passport. So it was really part of the colonies or the Commonwealth. And so people in Jamaica, they felt British, they were British, you know, they wanted to give back to the motherland. So people went over to Jamaica and actually recruited them, and they recruited them on the system, much like the Australian system. You couldn't just be any random person and come over. You had to be an engineer or a nurse, or you had to have some technical element that could be of benefit to England. And so my grandmother came over.
Lisa, is this post-war?
Oh, sorry, this is during the war. This is during the wartime, yeah. Okay. So my grandmother came over, and then she sent for my my mother to come over as well. I think my grandmother was helping make parachutes.
Wow.
Exactly right. And the reason I say exactly is because so many people don't realise that the black people in England just didn't come on a jolly, oh, let's just go over to England, let's have a little bit of it's the new IMF,
a bit of welfare,
you know, right? Exactly. And they came over, and you know, they were coming over to help rebuild the country, but they were coming over to signs like my mum said, that sign, no blacks, no what is it, no dogs, no blacks, no Irish, were all on the signage. So it was so difficult for them to even find somewhere to live, you know. So that's why Jamaicans have a big affinity for the Irish, and they love them, because they were facing a similar struggle. But eventually, later on, the Irish were able to assimilate, because, you know, they could hide in their whiteness, but blacks obviously stood out. And so my mum came over, and she went through a lot. She went through a lot because people were just wild. They would spit at her. They would spit at my sister, because there's a 12-year age gap between me and my sister. They'd spit on her, but at the same point they'd give her a penny, because they're like, oh, she's so cute. So there'd be one grandma spitting on her, and there'd be one grandma giving her a penny, because they're like, oh, this cute little brown baby. So it was crazy. And she came over to England and she ended up working for the government. So she's been working when she came over in her teens, and she started working for the government at 19. So
Your
she's
mum or
really,
your grandma?
no, my mum.
Okay.
So she's really been here a long time.
Yeah.
And she put me into a Catholic school because all the Irish put their kids into Catholic schools, and she was friends with all the Irish ladies, and she had the priest around for tea.
Yeah.
So imagine this little bit of Bob Marley playing in the background, and the tea, and the priest tucking into a bit of jerk chicken and Marks and Spencer's biscuits, of course.
For the priest.
For the priest. Like, Mum, you got the good biscuits out.
Put away the rich tea. Amazing. Well, that's another thing we have in common then, because I also went to Catholic school.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. And the priests are always the best fun anyway, you know.
Yeah, they were lovely. Like we had the priests, and luckily we didn't have, I can't remember, I only remember a few sisters, like a few nuns.
Yeah.
But I've only got good memories, luckily, because you know it can go either way.
Yeah. Well, that's another podcast, but yeah, it can go. Yeah, same. It's terrible, isn't it, to say I'm really lucky. That's
right. Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I actually made a baptized or christened the boys at the exact same church that I went to.
Did you?
A little bit naughty, because it's an outstanding Ofsted school. You know, it's attached to an outstanding Ofsted school, and I wanted the boys to go to the school. But I love God also. But yeah.
So you mentioned there that your grandmother came over during the war. One of the Windrush Generation, is that right?
Yeah. So basically, the Windrush Generation was when it was during the war, or even before the war, they needed people to serve. Whether it actually be, so they needed actually people to serve in the army and the RAF. So there were actually Caribbean and Indian and many other countrymen who fought in the war, or they fought to keep the home front safe. Yeah. So what they would do is they would either, like my grandmother, make the parachutes, or they would help with the buses, because the buses still need to be ran, and so on and so forth. And so what happened is people went over to Jamaica and they asked, please, you know, think of the motherland, because they knew that Jamaicans were very patriotic, and think of the motherland, and because on their passports it said Britain, it said England, it said British. So they didn't consider themselves separated. They just saw themselves as a part of the tentacle that was the Commonwealth. So many Jamaicans went over on a ship called the Windrush, although there were other ships before it, but the Windrush was the most famous. And with the Windrush Generation, there weren't just anybody. There were actually engineers or nurses. They had to have a technical aspect and quality that could actually let them come over to the UK. And it's funny because a lot of people came over to the UK and they were a little bit appalled at the condition of the education, because the kids were so rigorously educated in Jamaica, because again they were looking up to the motherland of England and assuming it was this really strong, you know, enforced education. And so when they came over, they were a bit disappointed, but at the same time they were being told that they were uneducated and that they were uncouth. And this is not to say that anyone is uneducated, no one is, but just to say that the bitter irony of, you know, a highly qualified doctor or engineer being told that they were a savage or that they were uneducated, I think was really hard for a lot of people, because they thought they were going to be not welcomed with open arms, but at least appreciated for the work that they were going to put into rebuilding England's economy, and also for the loyalty, because also Caribbean, West Indian, Jamaican servicemen and women, they also lost their lives. you know? So it's hard because even in the history books, it isn't written. Like, I met someone who was in their 40s, a well-educated person, and they didn't know about the Windrush.
No.
And it made me sad because a lot of people have a lot of resentment and even racism to Black people because they think, oh, they just came to England on a jolly. Oh, it's the new Iron Apple or Ibiza. When really they came over to help build the country. And they're not newly. If you see a 20-year-old, a Black person in England, they didn't just come on the previous aeroplane. Their mother was there. Their grandmother was there. In fact, sometimes even their great grandmother, you know, grandparents were there. So it's such a long legacy that people don't realize, you know, exists. So for me, that was hard growing up because people would always look at you as though you're an outsider when I had a grandparent who lived in England and had, you know, done so much for England. I had a mother who done so much for England. Not to say that England hadn't done a lot for us also, but, you know, there was this, it was just a difficult time because as much as you can feel you've spoken to, not spoken to people, as much as you can think you've broken through, you'll meet the uncle who's absolutely terrible, or you'll meet the aunt who's absolutely terrible, or you meet someone who says, well, you know, you're not like them, they're a bit, but you're the nice one. And I always said, well, if I'm a good one, there must be hundreds of good ones, you know? So I think that was interesting. It was an interesting.
Yeah, what I'm hearing here is like to be allowed to be the full spectrum of human beings, not to be all the spectrums of human beings that all human beings are allowed to be. So it's like, yeah, bad ones, good ones.
Exactly.
Like, and what? And what?
Exactly. And I think what's hard as a Black person is we're always seen as a group. You know, if someone does something wrong, it's, oh, he was a lone wolf. Oh, he was a bit troubled, a bit touched. You know, something went awry. But with Black people, it's always, oh, they are like this.
Oh, yeah.
And you were never seen as an individual. So when sometimes you get terms such as white privilege, I think that is a really bad term because people associate it with money, or people associate it with power. But sometimes you can just associate it with just being seen as a person, an individual. So I wouldn't actually, I haven't thought of a good word other than white privilege. And that was actually coined by a white sociologist. It wasn't. But I wouldn't use the word white privilege because then it goes into wealth. I would use the word, you have a white individuality, or I don't know, autonomy or something. You have the
white individuality.
you have the opportunity to be seen as a person rather than this big clump of people. And in that clump of people, there are so many amazing people like doctors and nurses, frontline NHS workers. Because my mum also worked before Rona, she worked for the NHS as well as one of the frontline receptionists. Yeah, she had 2 jobs because she's hardcore. Hardcore mama.
That's where you got your hardcoreness from. Fast forward to was it about 5 years ago or 10 years ago when the Windrush scandal? So
and this is a nice segue into conservatism because I was working for the Conservative Party, and a lot of people were like, how could you do that? That's kind of traitor stuff,
I'll be honest,
isn't it?
when you first told me that you were part of the Young Conservatives, I was like, wait a second, that doesn't fit my image of what you were going to be like. Do you know what I mean? Like,
it doesn't fit the image of what I was going to be like.
So I just loved it. And then I was like, wow, okay. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to speak to you today as well. In addition to just all your unbelievably rich storytelling, I also wanted to have this perspective come in as well. So tell us more about this. So you're going to tell us kind of the modern history of Windrush against the backdrop of your conservatism, right?
Yeah, because when Windrush happens, when the Windrush scandal happened, it happened because someone was allegedly, and this is all allegedly, to not get sued, allegedly, records were being deleted because they were considered not important anymore, or they were just being lost. And hello, if I am not going to delete my nana's records, so if they had someone who was Jamaican in that party, that person is not going to sit there and say, okay, I'm just going to delete my nana's records. And this is why I think it's always important to have people of colour, or although there's a saying, not all skin folk are kinfolk,
yeah.
Meaning someone can look like you but act in a way that's against you. But if you had someone who was Jamaican there, do you think that they would sit for 1 minute and delete their nana's records? No way.
Can I just give a little bit of background, because I don't think people understand what happened here. So let me see if I understand what happened. Was that Windrush generation, those people who were encouraged to come over here during the war that you described, that your nana came over during, they were given kind of open passage. They had British passports, and then there was no like massive immigration kind of, because it wasn't immigration, it was being welcomed from the Commonwealth back into the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
So there's not a paper trail left.
No, there was a paper trail, but the paper trail got disposed of, allegedly.
Okay, so allegedly,
because they were considered not archived the way they should have been archived, let's put it that way.
Understood. So then what then happened was that people were going to be sent back. Is that right?
Yeah, because they didn't have
a British passport, and there was no proof of.
Yeah, but yet they were 60 years old. They had an NHS number. They had given they'd given their pension money. They'd given their taxes. They'd given everything, their blood, sweat, and tears. Because what had happened is the Jamaican passport, because I've seen my mum's really old one, it had British written on it. So when you come to England, you're not going to change your British passport for a British passport. You're going to keep it.
Yeah.
And a lot of these families, they were here working hard, so they didn't have time to go back and forth. And when they went back and forth, it was still valid. I can't explain why exactly. And also, years ago, you could be put on your parents' passport. So there were a lot of kids that were put on their parents' Jamaican British passport, never travelled because they were so busy doing work, and maybe they didn't like aeroplanes, let's keep it honest.
Because we're allowed to have the full spectrum of humanity,
right? Like when you have Americans who don't even have a passport because they're interested in traveling, and because they were on their parents' passports and those documents, and it wasn't considered valid anymore. So when they went to renew their passport, they were told, well, you're not really a person because we don't have record of you. The records were lost. They were archived wrong. And so this person, even though they have their bank statements, they have their contributions for 60 years to England, they're told, oh, by the way, I think you should go back home. And it's crazy.
You're here illegally or something like
You're here illegally after 60 years of paying tax and everything.
Yeah.
And so people can't, and it was weird how it happened. So people would fly out and everything was fine when they flew out and the documents held up. And the minute they came back, they were told, actually, we've changed the
there's something inherently wrong with all of that.
It's insane. It's insane, and it's heartbreaking because it's unnecessary.
Yeah. And I think that, and so I want to kind of segue into your entry into politics here as well. So, I remember you when we were communicating maybe 2 years ago about like why I was interested in you and can I interview you, and you or like, this is amazing, how did you get into this? You were like, I was totally heartbroken and I really needed people like me to have a seat at the table. I think that was your word.
Yeah, well, this is exactly it.
So what happens next?
But how it actually happened is there was a TV show, it's going to sound crazy, but there's a TV show called Challenge Annika. Do you remember it?
Yes, I love
Challenge Annika and Challenge
Annika. In
Annika.
England, sorry.
I liked her outfit.
Yeah.
And Challenge Annika was challenged to make a centre for young people. And the centre was called YCTV. And the head of the centre, like the person who challenged her, was Sabrina Guinness of the Guinness family. Okay. So Sabrina created a place called YCTV. And I think for Annika's challenge, she had to fix it up in a short amount of time, something like that. And I think that was maybe to give it a boost of PR or something like that. So I went to this place called YCTV after I finished uni, because I didn't know what I was going to do, and I wanted to do like youth work, like help out. And they had like this program for people who were not sure what they wanted to do. Like you could go there, and because I was thinking maybe a media slant, because I'd always been interested in advertising, and this segues also into politics, because for me, I would actually consider myself politically agnostic. And the reason why is because of my interest in advertising, I'm used to a lot of spin.
Yeah.
I'm used to, so I don't trust anything. You know, I'm like, I don't know about you.
Yeah.
And so, and it also, it helped me to be in the Conservative Party, but politically agnostic, even though my mum was like hardcore Labour, because it meant that I was more, why? Like I would always ask why, you know. And getting back to Challenge Annika, so I was at YCTV, and it was a great place. It was a fabulous place, and they did youth work and stuff with young people to get them into media. And one day David Cameron was going to come round, and this was way before he was elected. There was a little young kitten. Yeah. And they were like, oh, go on, Liza, show me around. And I was like, no, my mum's going to beat me if I show you this Conservative around. And then they were like, no, just show him around. They showed him around, him and his people. And I started saying, asking them about their policies. And I was like, oh, I don't know about this, but you should do this. Like I knew anything about anything. And I said, well, I think you should do this, and I think you should incorporate this, and that would really help. And they left, but then they wrote back and they said, look, we're really inspired by the people that we met at YCTV. We would like to invite Lisa to come to speak at the conference about young people's issues. So I went to Bournemouth to speak at their party political conference, and it was wild. And so I spoke on the main stage, and my mum, bless her heart, she sat and watched BBC. You know you have BBC online on Sky, and she sat and she watched it over and over. I was like, Mum, it's on repeat. You can go make a cup of tea. They should sit there just waiting for me to come on, because they would do, the repeats around.
I'm feeling her feelings right now. I've got tears in my eyes, feeling how proud she must have felt. I'm feeling like so proud of you right now. I think Merlin's channeling Merlin somehow.
But she was proud of me, but at the same time she was like, I hope the neighbours don't see. Remember, it was Conservative.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And after that, and then I remember I left the conference, and it was really nice, and then I was going to go back to the hotel, and I just was like, you'll never be in this place ever again. Go back out, and you go mingle, and you go gate crash. So I just went out, and I just kind of gate crashed a few events, because you can just walk in when you've got your membership badge. And I just started talking to everyone, and I followed up everyone. I wrote to so many people, Hugo Swire, so many people, and it was just amazing, the feedback. And this was before internet was really a big thing.
Yeah.
So I would write to a lot of people. Yeah. And they would, and actually Hugo Swire, one of the MPs, actually wrote to me and thanked me for coming to the conference, said I should try to carry on getting involved. And it was just, and I just thought, yeah, of course I will. And there were so many, I haven't mentioned them all, but there were so many MPs and so many people that I reached out to, and they reached out back to me, and they were just so kind, and they were just so generous with their time. And then so I started going to the young conservative the young conservatives.
Why are you laughing there?
Because it just sounds so like not cool at all.
Well,
But
no, it's not cool, but it is kind of cool.
But so I would go to the Young Conservatives Association, because I'm the type of person, if I get a chance to enter a world I've never entered before, I want to see what it's really like. And it wasn't in a disingenuous way. I was really interested. I was like, okay, then I'm here. Let me find out a new perspective. And so I'd go to them, and I made friends, and I was invited to more and more. And then I ended up being elected as a social action officer for the Conservatives, for the Young Conservatives. And I campaigned for Zach Goldsmith and so many different people. And it's funny now because all my friends from the Conservatives are all MPs. So it's just strange. Like, I'll watch Question Time and I'll be like, I know you. I went down to the pub with you. And yeah, and then I was at a conference. It was like a retreat, a political retreat. And Daniel Hannan, an MEP, and he writes a lot as well for various different papers, he was there, and he said, look, I'm looking for people to be my researcher. And you know what, I ran to his table and I was like, yep, I want to do it, I want to do it. And of course I had to give him my CV, and you know, I had to have an interview. It wasn't just tick the box and go. But that's another thing about when people talk about positive discrimination, they always say, oh, you only got the job because you were Black. How about I got it because I ran to that table and I was like, listen, I want to work for you, because he gave a lecture and he was so inspiring.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it is A, being in the right place at the right time, but B, being really into networking, but not in a disingenuous way, just because you really want to know people. And also just saying to yourself, you'll never be in this position again, what have I got to lose? And I'm going to tell you, it wasn't easy being a Black Conservative, even within the Conservatives, because whilst people were very kind and very generous with their time, there were people who would be like, why is she here? You know, literally just because of my skin color, why is she here? And then I remember I got an interview with the Financial Times, and it was so funny because it came out, and I was at a friend's house, and I left the friend's house in the morning, and I was walking down the street, and they lived in a really nice area, and someone was reading at one of those open cafes, the Financial Times, and I was like, that's me on the front cover. Because I was on the masthead. Yeah. And and he was like, what? And then I went into this lovely Indian corner shop, and he let me sign a couple of Financial Times, because he was like, yeah. So I was on the cover of the Financial Times, but not because they were like, oh, you're Black, you'll do. But when I was interviewed for something else, no, they had a journalist come for something else, I was the one who's like, come on, do you want to go down the pub with me? Do you know what I mean? I was that person who said, come on, let's do this. And that's why for me also it's frustrating, because people will look at me and be like, oh, well, she ticked a box. But they don't realize I'm the type of person that will grab someone who's sitting in the corner and say, come on, let's go down the pub, not knowing that they're a journalist, or not knowing that they're this person. And then when people find out who this person is after, that's when they pay that person attention. But I was always there paying them attention because that's the kind of person I am. So I think that I found hard when it was in the early days. It's going to sound silly, the early days of the internet, but it wasn't like, you know, the internet was what it is now. And so you'd get a lot of blogs, and you'd get trolling under the blogs. And I would just be so hurt, because trolling wasn't really known of, you know, when people write because, you know, people use the internet to find out stuff. They weren't really going on it for fun in that way. So when you went on a blog, and I'd see people write stuff, and then I'd see people defend me, and it was really nice. And they would say, actually, that time that I was lost, she helped me. And I was like, oh, I didn't remember that time, but yeah, great, thanks. And so I found it difficult, because there were a lot of daggers and arrows thrown at me, and weird stuff. Like, for example, even showing what it's like to be a woman. I remember I sent in an interview. You know, when they do interviews, they'll send you the questions and then you'll write your response. And I remember meeting the chap that that wanted to do the interview with me and who I sent the information to. And he was telling me everyone, and this was like the Carlton Club or something like this, like somewhere really prestigious. Oh yeah, I had to edit so much of, you know, no, he said to me, oh, thank you for the interview, Lisa. You know, I did have to edit so much. And, you know, I did have to polish it up to make it standard, you know, of a high spec. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I read the bloody interview and it was exactly the same that I'd written it, word for word, comma for comma. And I was just like,
wow.
Wow. And obviously, darling, I used high level words. So someone would look at that and say, oh, that high level word, oh, she couldn't have thought of that herself. You know, it must have been true that that guy did edit her work to make it to a high standard. And I think this is what's hard, the belittling and the patronizing and the lies. Like, I know it sounds silly, but in Black culture, if you lie, it's a big thing because we just don't like liars. We're really into loyalty and trust. So if someone's a liar, it's really not a good thing. So I wasn't used to lies. This is not to say Black people don't lie, but it's just what we call a barefaced lie. That was a barefaced lie. And I wasn't used to lies. I was used to people just being like, yeah, you're ugly and I don't care. You know, that kind of like bluntness, but I wasn't used to lies. So that I found very difficult, being around people who were so strategic in the way they maneuvered themselves, because they didn't see me as a person, they saw me as a potential block or barrier. But however, when I say this, there were also utterly amazing people. So I cannot say this and say it as though I have an axe to grind or anything like that, because I met some amazing people at the same time. It's a plus and minus situation.
And I'm just going to interrupt that because I don't think you need to qualify that. We can assume that there's good people there who are putting you on, but what you're describing there is something that perhaps I wouldn't experience, that you would experience differently. So I think it's really important, and this is why I said there's many different ways to lead a life, and I want these stories out on the table so that you know, I can hear them. Like my whole body is hijacked with bile right now. I don't want to hijack your story, but I've just
say
reaction to that. It's like, wow, because at a kind of a gut level, I know what you're telling me. And I'm just going to jump back into your school life, if you don't mind.
No, go for it.
I remember you telling me when we had a drink one night that you were put in the special class at school.
Yeah.
Right. And then you went to university and stuff like that. And we had this conversation and we had quite a laugh about it. And I was kind of...
yeah, that was a lovely day. Thank you. I really enjoyed myself.
But you were so... This is why I wanted to interview you, because like just the things that you said were just like just that was a coaching taster day or something, and then we had a drink afterwards.
Yeah, that was an excellent coaching day, by the way. I recommend everyone to do it because that was fabulous. I really had a good time.
Thank you so much. But during that, so I'm just going to quickly give you a bit of props there as well, because I remember somebody who just kind of I'm not going to mention a name, but who just transitioned out of the corporate world and into their own business, was saying, I need to see data, I need to see this and this. And you said, actually, you again, just in that amazing way that you said, oh, it's interesting because, you know, there's research to show that if you're an entrepreneur, you can be better if you ignore the data, or it was something along those lines. There had been research done in that, and I was like, what she said, but I didn't know the research. So then I was researching afterwards. But it was just like you brought so much richness into that conversation at that point.
Thank you, I appreciate
and it was just so like, how can I say, like every time I speak to you, something like that happens. It's like,
oh, now I'm happy.
And that was really useful for that person as well, because I don't know, so say for example, she was at let's say she worked at CrossFit, Nobody needs another CrossFit place, right?
Yeah.
But like, if you do the data research, it'll say there are enough gyms in Japan,
Yeah.
right? But so you have to
Yeah.
ignore the data and follow your entrepreneurial instincts. And I just thought that was really, and I love that when people bring things, that obviously other people were donating things into that space as well, but that just really struck me. Anyway, so we were talking that day and you said that when you'd been at school, you'd been put in the special class, and I was like,
yeah, and I thought it was just me. And then there was, what's his name? Akala, Akala, and he spoke at the Oxford Students' Union, and he's a rapper, super intelligent, insanely intelligent. And he was talking about how he was also put in the special ed. And even though he then went on to go into the special and gifted program, and then he spoke about how he was on his way to the special and gifted program and got stopped by police. But anyway, that's a side note. But, and then I found out, hold on, and then when I was looking around, I was like, hold on, you know, we go to a Catholic school. It was predominantly white, but all the black kids were in the special eds class. And when I went to the special eds class, there was a teacher who wasn't familiar with me. And when I started reading, she thought I was like a little helper to assist the others, because she couldn't believe that. And even though they didn't need assistance either, because she couldn't believe. But what can happen, and it's what can happen, I find, in the liberal movement, is you can be not racist, but you can underestimate. And that can be worse than racism, because sometimes with racism, people might have a fear of you. And that shows that you have some sort of power or leverage. Not that that's a good thing either, but I don't know which is worse, for someone not to like you because they feel a kind of fear, or someone to feel sad for you because they feel like you're unequal. And sometimes in the liberal movement, what they'll do is they'll be like, oh, well, you know, black people probably have to go to the special needs class or the special education class. So I'm saying it might not have been out of malice. It might have been like, oh, well, we assume that because they're black kids and maybe their parent, even though the parent, my mum, when she gets on the phone, hello, you know, can master the Queen's English like anyone else, even with South African kids, you know, or Indian kids, you know, they've got perfect mastery of the English from their parents' side. And then obviously if you're born and bred in England, you've got well, I try, perfect English skills. But there was just this kind of, we assume they must be not as intelligent,
or not what they need from the parents at home.
Yeah, they always assume something is lacking. And sometimes these kids are doing better than the kids that they're ignoring to assume that something's lacking. And sometimes something is lacking. But yeah, that was hard. And I had the same thing with teachers. My sister is obsessed with like fantasy fiction, like dragons, and you know, before Game of Thrones, she was always into like these books. And as a child, I'd pick these books up and I'd read them. And, you know, they have a really high level of language and expression. So I would incorporate that into my stories, and I would have my mum come up to school because they would say, oh, why is she cheating? Like, she couldn't have written. Yeah, and I used to love the word.
That connects back to that guy who pretended that he'd corrected your stuff, right? That's
exactly
the same story.
Exactly. It's always,
I just said the F word on the podcast. It happens all the time. I'm sorry, but it just, anyway. Okay.
And then it's like the word, I used to like the word ascertain and thus, and you know, just silly stuff. And it wasn't even that amazing, but a lot of teachers just don't assume anything high of black kids. And this is a problem I noticed with my cousins, because they would be put onto foundation papers, and foundation papers is like a prison, because once you get onto a foundation paper, you could get 100%, you could never even so much as get a C, you know. It's like the worst. And so I would have to go up to my cousins' schools and be like, you know, while their mum was working, and be like, what's going on? Like, my uniform, like as politely as possible, and say to the teacher, no, you can't do this because my cousin's not stupid. And then my cousin went on went on to work for Goldman Sachs.
Oh, you can swear, it's fine.
But it's like, seriously,
Yeah.
you know, and this is what is difficult. It's, you can kill, the word kill with kindness is really true as well.
Okay.
So I think as people move forward, they need to realize that underestimating is as bad as fearing as well.
Beautiful. How do you remain, so again, like back to your optimism, how have you, I mean, it's not, I mean, I don't know what my
because I'm alive, I'm blessed. Yes. So really, and it's, you know, it's just, I can't, you know, I don't know, I'm just really grateful. I think it's being grateful of everything. And when I say this, it doesn't mean I'm always, you're going to catch me one day.
No.
Like, ah.
Yeah.
But it's just, we're alive,
yeah.
You know, and it's just one of these things. I used to go to a church that now is a bit controversial, but at the time I loved it because it was fun and funky and everyone was like in PR or MTV, and it's a church called Hillsong. And I remember at that church, they actually used to have it in the Dominion Theatre where they had We Will Rock You. So they had, so it was like, and they kept that kind of performance level. So it was like really like, you know, the pastor or the preacher wore jeans and a t-shirt and trainers, like, you know, the hipster church. And this girl was talking about how she was, I think she might have been in Rwanda, and her neighbours had turned on her. Everyone had turned, and they, you know, fighting broke out, and her classmates were knocking on the wall of her house saying, come out, we're going to kill you. And it was just, and she was just talking normally. And it's just mad to think of the things that people have gone through.
Yeah.
And here I am, you know, even though, you know, everything in my life hasn't gone perfectly, it hasn't not gone perfectly. Do you know what I mean? I'm alive. I feel blessed.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important aspect for me. And also, even with my kids, I was told I can't have kids. I've got a severe condition called endometriosis, and I was on the really severe scale. And you know, I love my doctor. He's so lovely, Daniel Goldsmith. And he went through the whole journey with me. And because he came into being a doctor when he was young, and then I was young, so we kind of grew up together. And he said the sweetest thing to my husband, he said, take care of my sister. And it's really nice because he's Jewish and I'm Catholic, but he was still, you know, compassionate. Not that he wouldn't be, but there was still this, and that's what I like. I like when people are just like, you're a person and you're a person. And so my doctor would send me to some of the best specialists, because he really looks after me. And they were like, yeah, well, we're sad to say, but you know, you might not be able to have kids. And I even had an operation where they said that he said, your ovaries no good, let's just cut it off. And I said, no, I wrote down, and this goes into women and having to stand up for themselves. I said, no, I wrote on my notes, do not cut that ovary off. And that could have been the ovary in my twin come out, you know? And then actually years later, when I went to have kids, and I actually ended up having my kids in the same hospital that I was born in, the doctor looked at my notes and smiled when he saw my little handwriting saying, don't cut off the ovary. And this was the maternity nurse looking through my notes. So it just goes to show, as women, we have to stand up for ourselves. Even if you go to the best specialist, you have to really advocate for yourself. And then going back to not being told I couldn't have kids, I kind of given up. Like, I was on the floor sobbing. I was like, God, why? Oh. And then I was just like, I just couldn't, I just didn't feel like I knew how to get over that. And then one day I went to karate class because I didn't want to go before, because I was worried if I was pregnant, something could happen to the child. But because of my condition, I would never know, my periods were all over the place. So I wasn't able to know you know, if I was pregnant or not. So I'd stopped go. I decided not to go, and then I decided, you know what, go. So I went to the karate class, and this was in China, and the guy said to me, "Why don't you have kids? You're married, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, thanks."
Yeah, cheers.
You know, the bluntness of
Yeah.
you know, Asian culture.
Yeah, yeah.
And he just, I said, because blah blah blah, and he said, you know, put your hands on your stomach, on your womb, and talk. How do you picture it? And I said, like a desert with camels. And he was like, no, you silly woman. Picture it as green, fertile, and lush, you know? And you don't ever say to your body something, because your body's listening. And I said to my body, okay, it's green, fertile, and lush. And he said, it feels warm, right? And I'm not kidding you, it felt really warm. And he said, carry on thinking like that. So after that, I carried on thinking like that. I looked after my body. I ate the right things. I loved on my body. I did as much as I could. But I also said, you know, God, I give it to you. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. I walk on with my life. And then I got pregnant with twins. So even just that taught me that you can never give up, and you can never say to yourself, you can never just give up, because what if I had given up? You know, what if I just said it's never going to work? You know, and that's part of the optimism as well.
Oh, love it. You know, my word for next year is starting to surface, which is faith.
Oh, I like it.
Just having faith in what comes next, because, you know, this time of year with my own business and then the next year's coming, I often start to feel like, oh my God, what's going on? And Laura, my assistant's always like, Sarah, you get this every single year. And there's some changes I want to make next year, and I just have to have faith.
You just have to have faith.
Yeah.
You just have to have faith, because everything in our lives, we co-write. Everything that is even here, we imagine how crazy it is. A thought and an action can make a family, or a thought or an action can make a life. A thought or an action can make you sitting on the beach, looking at the sunset. You know, so you never know where you're going to be. Yeah, no, and I think also one of the things that was really something that was pivotal growing up, there used to be a person, it's not the PC term, but there used to be in an area that I used to go to, there was what we used to call a tramp. I don't know if he's a homeless person called Fred. And this is actually, you can look it up. He was called Fred, and he used to be like a proper homeless person. He used to have plastic bags on his feet. He used to, you know, did he drink? I can't remember if he drank, but he was just, he had his little section and everything like that in like the greenery, and he didn't trouble anyone. So everyone spoke to him and they're like, "You're right, Fred, you're right." People buy him a cup of tea. Well, anyway, someone started talking to him and they were like, "Fred, why are you homeless?" And he said, "You know, I had a divorce and I went into depression and then I lost my job." And then the guy just started talking to him more and more and more. And he said to him, "You know, let me find out any information I can to help you." Turns out that I think it was in Grenada or Trinidad and Tobago, Fred had family, and the family had land, and Fred had all this inheritance that he didn't even and this is honest to God's true story. I'll send you the link after. He had land that he didn't even realize. So when this really nice, I think it was a shopkeeper that just had an interest in him, managed to get a solicitor involved, and the solicitor found out that Fred had an inheritance, and he ended up going literally from rags to riches. And I grew up knowing Fred, and I grew up knowing that story. So I think it kind of, you know, subliminally, all these stories of my mum and the train and Fred, and it just made me realize that you never know where you are in life, because anything can change. Imagine if, God forbid, Fred had given up in the worst way. So again, that's another reason why I always say to people, you never know where, because even just like my kids are 4, so even 5 years ago, no, I wouldn't say 5 because they were still cooking 6 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, if you had said to me I was going to have twin boys, I would say that's such a cruel thing to say. That is the worst thing you could say. That's so mean. How dare you say such a thing? Like, I'm always smiling, but that would have made me actually really angry.
Yeah,
and now look now.
Yeah. Oh. Oh, I love it. I love it. And this is such a nice way to finish this, which I think I'm going to call part 1, because
I'd love to do part 2.
I'd love to too, because we haven't even touched on your work with the football team, your time in China, the fact that you're a TV star in Japan. I mean, we
darling.
gone there, and like the twins and the trials and tribulations that you've had around them. And I mean, like, anyway, I know that there's been some health issues there and stuff like that, which is all very, you know, part of this. You know, there's that saying, isn't there? Life's rich pageant, or life's rich tapestry. It's all part of life's rich tapestry. And you mentioned the word pageant earlier, and also that you were a finalist in Miss Jamaica, which is also
Miss Jamaica UK, the UK version, because I'm a British passport holder, so I couldn't do Jamaica.
Sure. So I Miss Jamaica UK, forgive my error.
No, it's okay. There's so many different ones.
I get so excited and then I forget all the details. But yeah, so I just I really would love to do a part 2 with you, where we get
I would absolutely love that.
Oh yeah, let's do that next year then. Let's do that next year. And but I mean, this I love how much richness you bring to my table every time I'm with you.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Tell my husband that.
Well, that's a different story altogether.
I'm joking.
Like, marriage is the one thing.
Because I just get so used to it, isn't it?
Well, I mean, that's a whole other story. I'm not going there. But,
he's lovely. He's lovely.
I know. But you know, we're with each other 24/7 at the moment, aren't we?
Yeah.
But like, there's and also, and just on that note, you have 2 boys who are 4. So I'm sure that about 80% of your time is in processes: brush teeth, feed people, change nappies.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention that they're little models as well.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Uniqlo. I think it's great. So
yeah, and this is a really selfish point. But I was really annoyed at the Rhoda, because not only had so many amazing people lost their lives, my mum couldn't come over to visit, and she was supposed to come over for an anniversary and Christmas, and also the kids had their debut in every Uniqlo all over the world, and no one could see it. So that's a shame.
I saw it.
Oh, I'm so glad you saw it.
I saw it.
And the nice story about that is, before I was told I couldn't have kids, I used to have to avoid mother care and places like that because it was too traumatic. And then to go from that to see your child literally on a billboard inside the shop was one of the most amazing things that have ever happened. And
Thank you.
yeah. So it just goes to show, okay, but it just goes to show you never know in life. You really don't know. You really don't know.
No, you really don't know. Yeah, I mean, wow, that I've just realised the power and witness of that story. I've just got goosebumps on my body as it settled in. That sense of like seeing them up there.
Yeah.
Years ago, that would have felt like you would have turned away from that building.
Yeah, literally. It was the hardest thing before. So I just stood in Uniqlo and just like really ugly cried, like people must have thought I was nuts. Luckily I had my mask on, I was good. I had my mask on, I was just like, ooh.
Thanks, COVID. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh no, and I had to duck out because I was because this was the height of COVID, but I had to see my little ends. Amazing. So yeah, and also I want to thank you for doing what you do, because to the world you're one person, but to one person you're the world, and everything you do, it inspires other people. So you just have to keep pushing on.
Thanks. I really appreciate that, and I think that's a beautiful, beautiful way to end for now. And that message that you just said there goes on for anybody who's listening here. Thank you also for sharing so openly your story of the pain of not being able to have children, the diagnosis of endometriosis, the incredible joy of having your twins too. There's 2 other shows that address this kind of issues too. So Jessica Quarterman talks very candidly about miscarriage, and then Maya Ileto talks very, very openly about infertility and going through infertility treatment while at the same time losing her mother and losing control of her body and then regaining it through her business. So there's a lot of very generous stories out there to listen to about this stuff, and I thank each and every one of you for sharing those stories of the many different ways to approach motherhood and mothering and our bodies and just the miracle of being a human. And I cannot thank you enough, Liza. This has been, again, just
thank you. It's actually been enjoyable. Do you know what? I was nervous before, but I really enjoyed it.
I'm always
and
nervous
finally,
I know. Oh, that's right. It's our third or fourth attempt. But this, these things happen, and that's what.
I've got a new phone thanks to you. I was like, husband, I need a new phone.
Zoom killed your phone. I just can't thank you enough. It's been an absolute joy, and just so many things that I learned today about the history of my home of birth, and also
and especially Liverpool as well. Liverpool was I actually went to the Slavery Museum in Liverpool. It's on the docks. That was really
I've been there as well.
Yeah.
It was tough for you?
It was really tough because you know what's a funny thing in the English curriculum when you don't really learn it, it's kind of danced over, like page. It's literally just a page, so it's just glanced over. So if you missed that day at school, you missed it. But again, even just talking about slavery, it's not a case of people were slaves, but also they were mentally enslaved as well.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of baggage that people have to overcome with that. And so thanks to Liverpool for being, I think it's the only place, I think it's one of the only places in the world that's actually got one.
A slavery museum.
But
it's worth noting as well, the liberal in me is going, but it's about a tenth of the size of the Beatles museum. So there's that.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. That is a good point. Yeah. But speaking of the Beatles, I just wanted to add this because I love Liverpool and Liverpudlians. The Beatles were actually one of the only artists to say they would not perform in front of a segregated audience. So shout out to the Beatles.
Shout out to the Beatles. Yeah, shout out to the Beatles for me as well, for making the place that I come from the most famous place on the planet, I think. I've never been anywhere where nobody...
But it's fabulous. Liverpool is fabulous. Yeah. Before I went to Liverpool, people were saying, how can you let your kid go to Liverpool? She's going to, this, that, and the other.
It had a really bad reputation back then, didn't it, for being...
Oh, my God. Do you know Liverpool? But the people were just so beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, they were tough as nails, so you wouldn't cross them. And that's where the bad reputation comes from. Because they're so nice, like my mum. I wouldn't cross my mum.
Yeah.
Because that, and I think that's where they're not in the middle, people. Yeah. So when they do get upset, they do get upset. Yeah. But they are so beautiful, they're amazing, they're kind, and they're really friendly. And
there's that Irish connection there as well, of course.
Yeah.
So that would have been that kind of simpatico thing there too.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm mindful of your time, and I don't know, I don't want it to stop. I can stay all day and it just gets too long and long and long and long, and I know your boys are calling you in there, and so I would love to know the takeaways that people have from this one. I mean, for me, it's that wild optimism, really understanding, peeling back the layers of my home country and the Commonwealth and all that means, and we haven't even mentioned the word racism. We didn't even say the word, but I'm going to say it now, that we peeled back the layers of racism and the many, many shades of how it comes through, whether it be somebody pretending that they've adjusted your paper, or whether you get put in the special class at school.
Yeah.
All these are many.
And
Yeah,
I think also this is good time. I think also this is timely because of the Sainsbury's debacle. Did you hear about in Sainsbury's? They had an advert with a black family in it, and people lost their mind. They absolutely lost their mind. And it's so embarrassing because of the way they acted, but also because someone from America was the one who told me about this. So it's important because sometimes we think these things have gone away.
Yeah, no.
But they haven't. An advert that has a black family in it for Sainsbury's. Hello, my mum's been shopping there for 50 odd years. You know, it goes to show that the things that are hidden in the darkness do come to light, and we think that people are lovey and kind, but at the end of the day they still have these strange upsetting feelings.
I am disgusted by that.
You know what?
Disgusted.
And when you watch the advert, it's not even, you know, I heard all the fuss and I thought, it's going to be one of those annoying ones. And it was literally just a family having dinner and laughing and joking, and then they slapped on the word Sainsbury's. So you wouldn't have even known if you were watching it that it was an advert. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't so, oh, look, la, la, la. You know, it wasn't nauseating. It was just a family having dinner, and they happened to be black. And then, you know, the funny story is they actually had a trilogy of these adverts where they also showed a white family as well. But on YouTube, when you go to the one for the black family, they had to turn the comments off because people were writing such disgusting things. And it's just really sad. It is
sad.
It's kind of like, what is that? You know, like a bungee. You think you're going forward and then you get pulled back again. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So I think going forward, everyone who watches just has to be mindful that you might think that there isn't this underbelly of,
or that we're talking about something from the past when you were
in the
90s or 80s, or back in the day before slavery was abolished, or, you know, no, alive and well.
Exactly. And it's not even, and also, and I think I would also always say, never get stuck on slavery, even though that's the worst horrific thing, but do get stuck on segregation, do you get stuck, and when I say this, I'm not belittling slavery ever.
Oh no, I think it's
but I would say, because people do this mind mental arithmetic, and they think, slavery was many years ago, and the Byzantiums, I heard someone say, well, the Byzantium Empire, the Ottoman Empire, you know, and they do this mental arithmetic, mental gymnastics but no, get stuck on the fact that there's a little girl called Ruby Bridges, I think it is, and she couldn't go to school in the 1950s. Like, she's 50 years or 60 years old, and you know, that person's grandparents could go to school, but when she went to school, people were spitting at her, and it was just horrific. And all about Mr. and Mrs. Loving, which is such a good name, and it was in the 70s that they were able to get married because it was outlawed. So they would be watching Star Trek, and also you could be watching Star Trek and people would be getting lynched outside. So it's not even just to say just focus on slavery, although that is utterly important, is to realise what is lynching, what is the BNP, what is Stormfront, what are all these organisations that still exist today, and what is no dogs, no blacks, no Irish. And I think it's important for kids to know that side of history rather than just a history that's so long ago that they have no empathy for.
Yeah, and it's a unique position that you and I are in to watch this all happening from Japan as well. It gives a very interesting perspective to be outside your country, home
To be
country,
outside your country.
because it's so tiny.
Right. And
So
also
tiny.
what gets picked up, like imagine an American saying to you in Japan that, what is the Sainsbury's? Because they had this thing, and it's just like, it's embarrassing, isn't it?
I think it is embarrassing, and it's like, I think this is one of the points we had a kind of good one of those like humorous, because we both have a lot of humor. We can both there's a lot of humor in our emotional field. It was like when we had a drink together and you were like, they don't mean any malice when they put you in the special school. They just, there's this thing there, blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, I know that. There's a name for that. And you went, what is it? And I went, it's racism. And we had a really good giggle about it. That's basically, it's like, what is this Sainsbury's advert? And we can go, oh yeah, bleep, bleep, bleep. It's like, oh yeah, racism. That's what it is. And wow, I mean, wow.
But yeah. I just wanted to say that the problem with racism is because it's been used so often, the edge of it, it's like a knife and it's been dulled.
Yeah.
So when you finally do say racism, people are like, oh, racism.
Yeah, but
and it kind of sucks the oxygen out of the room.
Yes, I understand that, and I don't care, because
that's the best.
Because we didn't go into this interview talking about that.
Yeah.
I just let you tell the stories, and then by the end I understand that we haven't even named that name. So throughout,
but it's there. It's like a heavy. It's like a heavy cloud, isn't it?
It's like a heavy cloud. But every story you have told has, and this is why I love storytelling and stories so much, is that it's sharpened the knife, so that by the time I came to say the word, it was it's the right word, it's the fitting word, and it's not jargon, it's not I'm not going to dress it up in the, as you've invited me not to use the word white privilege and things like that. It's not dressed up, but it has been given this very rich backstory. That's the word I can feel from this.
I like that.
The richness to it, that then means that that it feels like the right way to kind of wrap this up. I don't want that to be the focus, because I think your rich, incredible story should be the focus, and that kind of
no, I don't mind whatever takeaway. I'm not scared of the word racism.
No, me neither.
And I'm not scared of anything else. I like the fact that we were able to show how something, whichever word you want to use, can affect someone's life, and how it can sneak in. It's like sneaky, isn't it?
Yeah.
It just sneaks in there, and you don't go looking for it, it comes looking for you.
Yeah.
So actually I think it's important, because sometimes people can hear this word racism, and they don't understand what it is until they break it down, and then they're like, oh my God, yeah, that totally happened, or that totally happened to my friend, or oh, that's what it was, that uncomfortable feeling that I had, that's what it was. So I'm not shy about the topic at all, and I'm glad that we approached it in such a sensitive way.
To be honest with you, that wasn't deliberate, because the reason is because I'm fascinated by you. That's why I invite people to be on this show and have these conversations with me, is because I'm fascinated by them. If they pique my interest, or if Laura says to me as well, like, oh, I'd really love to hear from her, or something like that, then I'm like, oh,
please tell Laura thank you as well.
Well,
the drama.
No, you were my pick. You have always been my pick. And she was like, oh, that'd be interesting. But so it's you, but it's just, it all came out onto the table, and then just at the very end I realized, oh, we haven't even mentioned that word, and that's what we're talking about here, and the many layers and the history of it. And slavery is such a massive piece of that. I mean, Liverpool holds an awful lot of pain. Excuse me. Wow, that must have really hit me hard, that.
And also what I was surprised at was how diverse Liverpool is, but at the same time, how much the history can hold people back that are there. So for example, I had a friend that I went to uni with, and she lived in Toxteth, but she was on the border, and so she would have, if she applied for a job, she would have to use her next door neighbour's postcode, because otherwise she would never get a reply. And I never knew about things like that, you know. And so for me, and this was a white lady, so you can get trapped in a history that's not your own, or you can get trapped in a situation because of history. And it's a difficult one, but I just really want to stand up for the people of Liverpool and just say that they're amazing. I just have to, if I get out something, because they were just really, they were good people, like really. I've got a lot of time. I learned that from there. Got a lot of time. Got a lot of time for people in Liverpool. It was yeah, the best days. It really was.
Brilliant.
And my mum actually said when I came to London that I lost my Liverpool smile, because I would come up to London and to visit and get fed when I was at uni, and I would be like, hiya.
Yeah.
Because I was used to it. Yeah, I was used to it. And then a bus driver turned around to me and went, and I was like, oh, I'm back. You know? And my mum was really angry. She said, you lost your Liverpool smile. And it's funny because my mum would save up to come to Liverpool, because she was like, no, I've got to look really good, because the girls look really good there, right? So my mum would save up so she could get a nice Glad rags. To just go to the shopping centre, because in Liverpool the girls really, you know, they really made sure they looked good. So that was another thing for mum. She loved it. I think she's sad that I didn't marry a builder and live in Liverpool, because she always wanted me to marry a builder so I could fix her house. And she always just like, they've got loads of disposable cash. And then she really loved Liverpool. So, but she's happy that I'm in Japan, and she's happy that you know, I go back and forth all the time, and she's happy that the world has led me to this strange and mysterious place.
Yeah. Well, to be continued, Liza. I'm
going
to talk about that, both of our experiences in Japan and mixed marriage and all that kind of stuff. Next conversation, I'll get you in for next year. And oh
my god, 2020, no, 2021.
2021.
Ooh, when the aliens are coming.
What?
Well, apparently that's the only thing. They've got like a bingo card on the internet, a meme, and the aliens are the one that hasn't come yet. So
yeah,
who knows?
Oh, by the way, you couldn't see this because we both got, and here's my other cushion as well.
What I'd represent. I love it.
So yeah, we're both representing there. All right, so thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you so much.
Lisa. Lisa, where can we find you? Do you have any?
You can find me on my Instagram. It's 2 posh 2 push.
2 posh 2 push.
Yeah, and you can also find me on, if you look up NHK. I know that NHK is shown internationally, and because I was in London when I first saw the show that I am on now, called Cool Japan, and you can just look up because they have many repeats and I'm on often, and so you'll see me there.
NHK Cool Japan, and I'm sure there's YouTube videos and everything out there as well on the NHK feed. So again, thank you so much, Liza.
Thank you so much.
Go and follow her, give us some love, find out more, watch Cool Japan, and remember everybody, there are many, many ways to lead a life, and everybody has stories, and I want to tell them. And thank you for this unbelievably rich story today. I'm absolutely delighted to have hosted you finally. And bye everyone. Thank you for watching. Bye.
Bye.